Hey folks, Brenton Lengel here, and I am here with. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My sobriquet for the internet would just be Bob. I'm Mustache Bob at Twitter. I'm the co-host of a weekly podcast called 5x5 Podcast, which I've found out that we might have to rebrand soon. I host it with my friend whose sobriquet would be Rocco. We usually discuss matters of philosophy and politics and current events with an aim to advance our dialectic understanding of the universe and what's going on in the world. And I agreed to join Brenton on a debate regarding the origins and nature of morality tonight.
Yeah, and just so if you're just encountering me, my name's Brenton Lengel. I am a poet, playwright, and writer. I'm the author of the comic series Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, the second comic of which is about to come out. Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like.
I didn't get to say it, but that is one of the most badass titles I've heard in a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, I was happy when I came to it. It was one of those moments where like lightning struck. It started out as a 10-minute play in New York 10 years ago and just has gradually built from there.
Where was it in New York?
Well, I lived in Harlem for 10 years.
Dope.
And it was originally I think the first production, and really it was written for a 24-hour play contest, so we did a production of it with cardboard props within. It had to be written, selected, rehearsed, and performed all within 24 hours based on a prompt.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it went up at a theater in Tribeca, I think.
Sweet.
Yeah, and then its first official production was with the Estrogenius Festival at the Manhattan Theater Source. Now, unfortunately, that space isn't around, but it's down on McDougal Street.
Yeah, I remember it. I lived in North Jersey and then in Manhattan for a little while. So.
Great.
Yeah. I'm in exile in the South at the moment, so I can't get good pizza, but it's pretty cool to hear.
That's the worst thing about the South, honestly. Nothing else.
Only the systemic racism.
The systemic racism and the bad pizza.
It's fact.
I luckily got out of the city right before COVID, so I'm not living in Manhattan anymore. It was incredible. I lived in Sugar Hill, Harlem. I'm the playwright in residence for a company called State of Play, and they brought 7 of my plays to full production in New York. And then I'm also collaborating with a rock and roll gothic band called the Crew Shadows. They've beaten out Madonna and Beyonce for the #1 dance hit in the world. They got #1. They beat out them in 2005, and then they got #2 and only lost to a song from High School Musical 2 a year or two later.
Oh, sweet. Now, can I drink? If I can drink an IPA to it, I'm down.
Oh, that sounds great. Are you drinking an IPA right now?
I am drinking an IPA right now.
That's great. I got Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale right here.
Oh, that's not bad. I'm enjoying the Sour Monkey triple from Victory Brewing.
Oh, that's not bad at all. I think I had that on the Appalachian Trail, actually.
Yeah. They just started selling it big time now, and I can't get enough of it.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So this is our first time collaborating on a debate. You and I were aware of each other because we were in a mutual anarchist Facebook group.
Yeah, is it anarchist? Were we communist versus libertarian debate group? Was that us?
I mean, communist versus libertarian debate. Yeah. I don't know if it's anarchist. I was invited there by Josh Hilditch, who's an amazing guy, if you've met him.
I haven't, but I got invited in somehow. But yeah, he seems pretty cool.
Yeah, Josh and me were admins on the original ANCAP versus ANCOM debate group, which then rebranded to Libertarian versus Anarchist Debate to bring in more people.
Cool.
And then, he just went around adding me to all these other groups. And so, CVL has basically become AVA 2.0.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. Now I know a little history.
Yeah, it's great that you were talking about dialectics. Are you a Marxist?
I was for a good minute. I think everyone has their embarrassing phase where they pick up the Communist Manifesto and then they're like, "Oh my God, my labor is being exploited," even though you're fucking 15 and not working. I'm sorry, language. I'm sorry. Should I censor the?
No. You don't have to. It's the internet.
But yeah. So I was. over time you read other things. You start to read the existentialists. You read Camus. You read Heidegger and realize he's a bit of a Nazi. And then you kind of evolve philosophically. I get the vibe that you probably had that same phase and then went into anarchy.
Yeah, I never did the Marxist thing because no. Well, here's the deal. So my political journey is actually really interesting, or at least it's convoluted. I started out like fairly conservative. In fact, I 100% supported the neocons, like because I was in high school at the time. I didn't know any better, and I was way behind. I was behind the war in Iraq because I actually believed in the mission of like nation building, and I'm like, oh, Saddam's a bad guy. Yeah, let's go in there and topple him and make things awesome. That sounds great. And I really thought the United States could and was a force for good in the world. But I was like 18 and had no idea what was going on.
Well, that's a whole can of worms. We could have a whole conversation about that.
Oh yeah, and then like in college, I was a right-wing libertarian because I got to college and like I was still fairly conservative, but I didn't hate gay people. So it was like I should be a libertarian, and that really struck me for a number of years. Until I got out of college and got into like an actual job. And as soon as I like experienced like the real workforce, I was just like, oh, this is bullshit.
Oh, that'll do it for you. The tragedy is that not a lot of people realize the exploitation inherent in the market, and they blame the government or social structures for the alienation that they feel, which is something that you can hear about on the 5x5 podcast. Like us on Facebook.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like I became like just like a Democrat for a little while. What happened to me was a very dear friend of mine passed away in his sleep while I was going through this because I was working for a job. They were exploiting the hell out of me. They had me working 60, 80 hours a week for no overtime, and a salary that they assured me was just over minimum wage. And I did it because it was an arts job. And like, how many of those are there? Like I got to see it.
bourgeois theater is a bear, man.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I was basically working at this dinner theater and the crappy town in Kentucky that I had finished out my high school in. A good friend of mine, like I had gone on to be the professional artist, and he had sort of stayed in the town and taught and mentored the next generation of freaks, even at his own like writers group and stuff. And he had become a teacher, and he passed away in his sleep right before, like at age 25, 5 days before I turned 25. Yeah, it was tough. I've spent a lot of time dealing with it, but it was like a major catalyzing event for my life, and it pushed me to do so many things. So I left the job 8 months into a year contract. They agreed to give me a sabbatical, and I hiked the Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia. And I didn't know it at the time, but like the AT functions very much like an anarchist community without the ideology. You're 10 miles in the woods. There's no law. There's no police. Everybody still takes care of everybody. And you function in a very communistic way where you brag about how little you have. Like that would be what we would compete over, is like who's got the smallest pack, who's got the thing that does the most for little. And, you just walk north every day for 6 months. And it was one of the best experiences of my entire life. And then I got out of that. I summited Katahdin, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not afraid of anything anymore. Time to move to New York. And I realized I had no money, so I had to raise the money and deal with a bunch of other crappy odd jobs. But then I moved to Manhattan, and I was on the ground for Occupy Wall Street.
Dude, I was in Zuccotti Park very, very briefly, actually.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, super briefly. It was like 3 days before they like demoed the whole thing, and like, so
I remember that. You mean before Bloomberg raided it and pulled everybody out of there?
Exactly. And like I was down for it, but at the time I was like, yeah, I'm not getting my skull cracked in. So I mean, that doesn't speak very well of me, but No,
it does. It means you're smart.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's one of the more important social movements in our history, modern history.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because it's so weird with the riots that are going on right now, which seem to be breaking into like full-on revolution and in some instances. Like, I really feel like at Occupy we were woefully ahead of the curve, which I guess that's part of the condition of being, in the broadly like leftist counterculture movements.
Yeah. And it didn't succumb to the danger that you find in a lot of counterculture, where you define yourself only in opposition to the thing that you don't like. And you're right though, that is kind of the not the revolutionary vanguard, because we're not Maoists, but that is kind of like the thing about being on the left, reading theory and kind of sort of understanding where the dialectic actually is that you kind of wind up being ahead of a lot of your peers on a lot of social issues that they come on to about 5 or 6 years later, and you're like, I freaking told you.
You should totally talk to my friend Caleb Maupin, actually. Do you know him? Or
No,
do
I
you
don't.
know of him?
No.
Yeah, Caleb, he's a reporter, was originally with Press TV, now he's with RT. He's been
he had a debate with that one bro on YouTube about China.
Yeah, and Vaush. I actually had a conversation with Vaush that I have some of the audio from that I may be posting. I was trying to talk to Vaush and like not debate, just like have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
He seems a little stuck in the debate mode, but it went reasonably well.
Hey, fair enough. That's all you can hope for these days. I think the conversation we had just went pretty decently. I think I tripped over myself a little bit more than I would have liked to.
Oh yeah, you were great. I mean, I brought you on because you really impressed me in the thread, and I checked out your podcast. I'm like, okay, this guy's doing a podcast, means he's got a decent audio setup.
Yeah. I hope it's okay now. I'm on my porch smoking and drinking beer, so I hope it's doing okay.
Hell yeah. No, it's doing fine. You sound great. And I did my own radio show for like a year called Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, and I brought on a bunch of like activists and stuff. And we had George Martinez, who was the Occupy candidate for Senate in New York. We had Captain Ray Lewis, the former Philadelphia police captain who was arrested with Occupy, and he and I are very good friends.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. And also, we had some other. I had Andy Stepanian of like Shack 10 or Shack 7, the Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty thing. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, Andy, he was pretty high profile. And then Caleb and me, we became friends through Occupy, and like we were acquaintances. And then we like really became friends when we were both covering the Cecily McMillan trial, which was the last trial with Occupy, where they tried to put her in prison for 7 years for accidentally elbowing a cop.
What can you even say about that?
It seems like it was ridiculous back then, but it seems especially ridiculous now.
Yeah, which means that we're making dialectical progress, so you can take a little bit of comfort in that.
Yeah, and to go back to put things on because we just finished doing the debate against the two Christians, Converse Contender and Randal Rauser, is that what his name was?
Randal, shit, I just had it. Excuse me. Randal, something like that. Randal.
Yeah. I actually really enjoyed
Rauser.
Randal Rauser. Yeah, I actually enjoyed that because I'm just coming off a debate with like frickin' JF Garape, who's like
Thank you for that, because I didn't know who that guy was, and that's a space in my mind. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you had to be introduced to that.
Where's his? I was waiting for his calipers to measure someone's skull.
Oh my god, that debate was. I was very happy with it, like because I kicked his butt, or at least that's what people are saying. But like those alt-right debates are like they're so high stakes. Because, like, you can go in there with some Christians and we can have a nice conversation and everybody looks good and smart and people think about the thing. But, like, if you do that with an alt-righter...
No. Well, the other thing is that the Converse Contender and Mr. Rauser, or Dr. Rauser, I don't know. I don't want to, be mean to him. But they were both genuinely intelligent guys, and I think they were coming from a good place. But, like, an alt-right guy is neither of those things.
Yeah, I mean,
like
Yeah, well, Caleb and me, it started because JF challenged me actually to a debate, and Caleb and me debated Mike Enoch and Eric Stryker, which which I think was a huge mistake. Like, we didn't lose. In fact, I caught Mike Enoch in a lie, and there's even a part in the debate, if people go back and watch it, like where Eric Stryker's voice breaks, but like. Like, Caleb's a real journalist. Like, I've got a ton of activist experience, and it was like going on with like two freaking morning DJs, except their jokes are like, it's dad jokes. It's them denying the Holocaust and playing fart sounds.
Yeah, like if Nazi Germany won the war, they'd be hosting the morning zoo.
Exactly. and which was another point that we had in the debate, which is the whole concept of moral progress. And I really found, like, in the debate that we had with Converse, I like Converse a lot. He's been a pretty good moderator.
He's like a great guy.
Yeah, and the other guy, Randall, am I?
Or Randal Rauser, yeah.
Randal Rauser. I keep getting him confused because Ronda Rousey.
I know.
Yeah, like, they were very smart and thoughtful, but I also found, like, the arguments were somewhat lacking. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I felt like there was a lot of appeals to emotion and a lot of appeals to, I really want this to be the case, and therefore it must be the case.
Yeah, which is why I was talking about social construction, referencing different thinkers. I was trying to keep it as much on an entry-level thing as possible, because I didn't want to spend 2 hours talking about Foucault and the structures of power. But like, they never, I felt like they didn't really address the argument that, in fact, morality is a product of the society and is socially constructed. Instead, they said that, well, you just know, you feel moral right and wrong, without addressing the fact that those feelings that you get are constructed and transmitted to you by society and by the structures that you engage with in society.
Yeah. Well, and I agree. I liked it that Randall actually, like, acknowledged, because I actually had brought up the point about certain people not being able to see color based upon culture, to kind of move people in the direction that so many things that we think are parts of objective reality are actually subjective, and we just sort of project objectivity on them because they just seem so self-evident and apparent to us. Like, that was something that I actually, early in the debate with JF, I challenged him on, and he lost his shit over, and then I had to obliterate him on his credentials.
Nazis tend to do that.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's like, but so this was actually something that I really wanted to bring up, because I find that ANCAPs have issues with this when they argue about natural law. And I also find that, like, you see Christians have issues with it. This is, interestingly enough, it's kind of a defeater for praxeology, because I really think that the major mistake that undergirds and ultimately makes, like, all of praxeology incorrect is the confusion of purpose. Like, Rothbard and von Mises, when they talk about the first axiom, they're like, they contrast purposeful action with purposeless action, and they seem to talk about it like it is a inherent property of the action, as opposed to a judgment that a human mind makes about the action. So, like, to kind of bring it full circle in the same way of, like, color, or even shapes. Like, one of the arguments that I meant to bring up in the argument was that, like, there's no such thing as a perfect circle. Triangles are never found in nature. Squares, nothing. Everything is an organic shape, and the brain just kind of goes, okay, that's circly enough to be a circle, and that's triangly enough to be a triangle. Because everything that exists in material reality is necessarily flawed. So no matter how triangularly this organic shape that you might find in nature is, it's not actually a triangle, it's an organic shape, and your brain projects the ideal of a triangle onto it. And I feel like that's what's happening when they talk about like natural law, or they talk about objective morality. Their brain is saying it has the ideal in it, and they are projecting it onto the behavior and saying that, what happened to George Floyd, that is objectively wrong.
So I was about to bring up Deleuze, and it's kind of difference in repetition. They don't see how they have to repeat all of these different ideas that they've been transmitted in their head to come to these conclusions. They don't see like George Floyd's murder, see like all of these different other instances of murder, and see how they're repeating all of these things that have been transmitted to them over time through society onto this singular event. So they assume that it's some transcendent moral principle and law of the universe.
Yeah, which I wish it was, to tell you the truth. Like,
oh yeah, that'd be great. I mean, like if there were like moral laws of physics that you couldn't possibly break without like the creator stopping you, that would be a utopia. I mean, provided the creator's good, but you know, the concept of a good or evil God is a advanced philosophical topic that might be beyond the purview of that conversation.
Absolutely. You know, there was another thing that I had kind of wanted to bring up on that. Oh, I think I lost it. Hang on. We were talking about the creator. You were talking about it'll come back to me. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, keep talking.
Yeah. So they never actually brought up the specific moral objective truths of the universe because, one, they don't exist. But the other thing is that they were speaking very much from, and I hate to use the term Western because it is literally just a placeholder in philosophy and sociology, but they use that perspective that they're coming from, and they don't realize that other societies, other philosophical perspectives don't share those same transcendent moral truths, even in their own context, because I gathered that Randal is a Christian theologian. Christian values have changed dramatically over just the last 100 years, much less the last 2,000 or 3,000. Of course, we had to bring up Nazi genocide because every debate on the internet winds up talking about Nazi genocide. But but if you look at
least there was no Nazi in the room.
Yeah, that's a plus. That is a plus. Thank God. Or whomever, Vishnu, Gautama Buddha, whomever.
But yeah, but you can thank whoever in my presence.
Yeah, thank Zeus, Odin, whomever. But
married by the power of Thor. So
yeah, exactly. But they don't realize that those people believed they were acting completely morally. Flannery O'Connor has that great and famous quote in literature where every man is the hero of his own story. Mm-hmm. So like when you get into moral absolutism and deontology broadly, you kind of get into a place where you think that people who act immorally according to your beliefs are acting deliberately immorally instead of based on a code that they've developed over time. And that's something that I didn't get to bring up, but I think it kind of winds up being clear because they brought up MLK and they didn't kind of realize that there was a huge populist movement behind him.
Yeah.
Like gigantic. I mean, like you don't just attract that many people to march across a bridge in a segregated city based on your own individual moral conclusions. You do it based on dialectics, based on winning the argument in like a very basic term, or appealing to the ideology that the country has, because that's something that people kind of gloss over in the civil rights movement, is that it's a very beautiful and wonderful movement, but the other thing is that they were pointing out how we weren't living up to our ideology, our stated ideology as Americans, with segregation and disenfranchisement. And that's something that we're still pointing out, that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, are in the streets now pointing out too. Yeah. And
well, and it's been really interesting for me because I haven't gotten into the streets. Like back in 2011, when Occupy happened, I was motivated. I was like, I have to go out and do this, or I won't be able to face myself in the mirror tomorrow.
Yeah.
But like I'm 10 years older. I have a wife. I have a kid. I've got stuff that I've got to deal with, and so I've kind of been in retirement, I should say, as an activist. But like, I really feel like a lot of what we were trying to do with Occupy, like this moment now, it feels like the voice of and the experience that people who have gone through Occupy is really needed with regard to this. And I haven't seen a lot of my contemporaries doing much. I did see people that at the time I was trying to inspire to get in the streets are finally now getting in the streets. But a lot of the activists, myself included, who were there 10 years ago are not there, which I find a little bit worrying. But also, I mean, maybe this is just the way these things go.
Yeah, that neoliberalism really grinds you down over time, man. So you're going to lose a lot of activists. But, it's kind of good that the Zoomers are getting involved. So this might be their moment to do that. I mean, and if you think about it, we just went through a really disappointing Democratic presidential primary. But at the same time, the issues that are being brought up in our politics now would not have been there if it wasn't for the dialectical force of Occupy and movements like that 10 years ago. The thing that I'm a millennial. I'm in my 30s now.
Ditto.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough, brother. Oh man, like Super Mario is like almost as old as I am. but the thing that I think our generation kind of lost and the Xers didn't care about is that we don't realize that some of these things, building a moral code, which is the debate we just had, or building a new dialectic in American politics, are years-long projects, if not generations-long projects, and we have to keep hammering away at it. And it's so important. The debate we just had, it is so important to maintain the structures that transmit morality as democratized and empathetic structures, because these are conclusions that we've come through the dialectics of hundreds, if not thousands of years. And you brought up the example of like a hypothetical authoritarian bird worshipping cult taking over everything. But like, it is so important to keep something like that from happening, not just because I don't want to, go to church and say, "Hail Big Bird," but, but also because we have, according to the, socially constructed values that we have now, made tremendous progress, and it's so important to continue making that progress. And the moral absolutism that people who hold that position, deontologists, modern day Kantians that somehow still exist, hold, not only try to kind of hold that back because they believe that their current moral conclusions constructed by society are transcendental law, but they also limit the imaginations of people trying to make moral progress. Because, if you look at the medieval era, like 1,000 years of darkness in Europe, darkness and war and whatnot, they believed that they had reached the end of history. They believed that that's how things had always been and how things always would be and how things always should be, because it was an objective moral fact. And the possibility of questioning wasn't there. And that's kind of what deontologists not, maliciously, I don't think either of the people that we just had a conversation with were particularly malicious people. But that's what they're unknowingly kind of trying to impose on people through their absolutism.
Yeah. Well, deontology in general has been something that I've been battling against for quite a while. I really think morals, and I said this in my opening statement in the debate, it is, for lack of a better word, it is a dialectical process. It's deontology. Like, humans tend to make decisions by deontology running headlong into consequentialism, along with other ideologies, and what is and is not moral is worked out through that process. In fact, it's interesting too, because I remember this from college. I did a college course on the Bible. And it was titled "What Bible Do You Read?" And it went into stuff about typos and documents and all this other stuff. But one of the big things that they had was there was a mistranslation in one of the first lines in Genesis, and it was in the beginning there was the Word, and that's what it's normally translated as. But the actual Greek term, I think, that they used was more in the beginning there was the conversation. And right there, that's a huge difference.
It is. Well, it's a huge difference, and the other thing too is that the meaning of a lot of the words that are translated into English have changed since they were translated into English. Nietzsche, who I brought up in the debate, his Genealogy of Morals, which is never really addressed, talked about kind of the word noble, which is a very interesting word because it used to just refer to strength. Yeah, completely, it was just you're strong and bad guy, not bad, but like
Badass.
you're a tough, badass guy. You're tough. You're wearing a suit of armor. You're chopping people's heads off. But now, through the integration of what he called slave morality, which I really wish he had picked a different word.
Yep.
But
there's a lot about Nietzsche I wish you'd done differently.
Yeah. The mustache was perfect. But other than that, like if the integration of that morality and the synthesis with what he called master morality, God damn it, Nietzsche. But created a kind of a new morality, and that was his conclusion. I didn't get to really touch on that. That was his conclusion, is that there needed to be kind of a synthesis of those two moralities. That the Ubermensch, which again, thanks, Frederick. But
you can't fully blame Frederick. I mean, you can't blame him for those terms, but I mean, his sister
absolutely.
was a Nazi and like retranslated his work and put it more in line with like fascist ideology.
Exactly. It's the same with another two guys I like, Heidegger. Who deserves it? He deserves it, but also Ernst Junger. Storm of Steel is actually a really interesting book to read, but it's been so appropriated and used by Nazis that you can't read that in public because someone will.
Yeah. Well, the frickin' Nazis just love to steal. They're like furries, and except they're horrible because like I've got some friends who are furries and like are actually like really good activists and good comrades and stuff, and they were in my freaking wedding. By the way, attend a furry wedding. My wedding was not a furry wedding, but I went to theirs. It was one of the most fun things I've been to.
See, the only furry event I was at, kind of peripherally and by mistake, was I was in DC, and I went to eat at this noodle bar, Raw Noodle Bar in DC, great place, plugging it, not even sponsored. But I walked out, and that night was the Unite the Right 2 rally.
Oh God.
No, it gets better. It was Unite the Right 2, it was FurryCon, it was Comic Con, and it was BronyCon, all in the same night. So I come out of this noodle bar, and I'm walking around, and I'm like, what did they put in my noodles? I had to video chat my friend. I'm like, am I seeing this right now? Is this real? Like I never need to do DMT because I've seen it. Like on this, like there's all these like Nazis like everywhere and furries, and they're actually furry Nazis, which weirded me out too. Yeah. But like, that's
the Nazi fur. His name is Foxler. Original name. Don't copy.
Is that real?
Yeah, that's real.
Oh,
and
no.
it's even weirder because Hitler demanded that people call him Wolf. He wanted like women and stuff to call him Herr Wolf.
Well, you don't know what Hitler did in the bunker with Eva.
I don't want to know.
I'm happy to not know.
There was oh God, but yeah, that's hilarious. I didn't realize that went on with Unite the Right.
Oh, and there was a Shakira concert too. That same night. So there were like Colombians in the streets. It was great.
Oh man, that's badass.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I was not at. I didn't counter protest Unite the Right. I was done with my activism at that point. I did have a friend who was there, and he had recently gotten into a fight with a Nazi who attacked him, and he punched him so hard in the eye that he cracked the guy's cornea. And the dude had to be airlifted. No. So he gave a Nazi a helicopter ride.
Oh, ironic. Well, I was in the U.S. Army at the time of Unite the Right 1 and 2 actually, so I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to really protest.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your tax money, man. I paid for a lot of whiskey.
I'm sure it did, and that's the best use of my tax money. If it can go to more whiskey and less predator drones.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember watching Unite the Right, and I remember my friend, he actually got arrested by, I said in the debate with Eric Stryker and Mike Enoch that it was Identity Europa, but I was actually wrong. I think it was the TWP. It was whoever was in those freaking white polo shirts with the tiki torches looking like George Michael Bluth.
Oh, oh my God, they do, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
I just realized that.
But yeah, but
they are all George Michael Bluth. That's the thing.
That's George Michael Bluth grew up to be a neo-Nazi. That's canon.
Well, as a vet, I thought it was very funny that one of the bros that organized that Unite the Right rally was talking about how many people he killed in Afghanistan and how much of a combat killer he was.
Oh my God.
Dedicated infantry combat killer, due out the acronym. But it turned out that he worked in a warehouse and never deployed, so, which is so emblematic of the modern alt-right movement that it's hilarious.
It's so weird because they have these ideals that they try to live up to and they fall on their face because like the ideals do not correspond with reality. This is shit they've seen in movies and television.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really frustrating too because like you can tell, like, I'm a Buddhist, I'm compassionate even towards Nazis, even though they need to be stopped and restrained until they stop being fucking Nazis. But you can tell that the ideology really hurts them and damages their personal and interpersonal relationships and isolates them. I mean, it's a fucking death cult.
Well, it's kind of Hegelian recognition for them, in that like they don't realize the harm in the superior inferior nature of Hegelian recognition. They just want to be the superior one, and their reference for being the superior one is these awful action movies. We missed this week on the 5x5 podcast, which you can follow on Facebook and SoundCloud. But
I definitely will.
Thank you so much, and please comment. And guys, comment on every one of our episodes that my co-host Rocco needs to watch Tiger King, and tweet him at Space Rocco2 on Twitter that he hasn't watched Tiger King and he fucking needs to. But
you guys totally need. Yes, that is so emblematic of class struggle in the United States. I wanted to talk about it with Caleb, but he hasn't watched it, and his wife doesn't want to watch it, so that's not happening.
Carol Baskin got the zoo, man, just like this last week. But
that's depressing.
Yeah, but we're gonna eventually wind up doing a whole episode on the last Rambo movie, which I just saw during the lockdown, and how like it's this insane like fantasy of being this avenging angel that rights all of the wrongs through violence, but without ever addressing the systemic issues that have created those those problems and that alienation that you feel. And that's kind of what the problem with the alt-right is, and it's kind of a problem with absolutist thinking in general, because those same people probably have an absolutist value set. They believe that they found this ideology, that it's an objective fact that X, Y, and Z, whatever awful Nazi talking points are going around right now, and that they need to impose this on everybody because it's an objective fact, which is another flaw with absolutist objective morality.
In that what happens is once you have that objective morality, you have infinite license to go out and impose it on others.
Exactly correct.
We should have brought that up in the debate.
Yeah. I don't think they wanted it to come up, to be honest with you. Not the moderators, but I don't think that's an issue that the two gentlemen who we were speaking to particularly wanted to discuss. There's that famous quote, kill them all, God will know his own.
Yeah.
Kill them all and let God somewhere out was the Vietnam version, but the original one was spoken.
It was like the Spanish Inquisition or something, wasn't it?
It was the French Crusades, I think. It was a French bishop, and I only know this because of Warhammer 40K and because I'm a giant nerd. But
ditto.
But that was considered like a moral statement. Like, this guy said, "Kill them all, God will know his own," and the people who went and did the killing were like, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely correct. It's an objective fact that God will know his own." And
so we're gonna go and kill all these people, and all the good ones will go to heaven. So it's great. So we're helping them.
Exactly correct. That was like considered like, that wasn't like decried as like this giant war crime in medieval Europe. That was par for the course, and that's kind of one of the consequences of having that absolutist thing, that absolutist thought.
Well, it was interesting too, because I didn't really get a chance to I was really hoping that one of them was going to ask me to provide a moral grounding for my like a grounding for subjective moral ideology. Yeah. And I was prepared to jump into this whole freaking thing because my Buddhism has informed a lot of how I see the world, and like so I can actually go using, they sort of touched on it with like the mystic law of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, but also like I can go into like Buddhist cosmology and the modern understanding of Buddhist cosmology and how this undergirds why we should make certain moral choices and not make other moral choices. And I was like, come on, ask me for it, and they never did.
And they also never provided a reason that, like, even though a creator might be all powerful, why we should listen to him. And I think it's very interesting, and I didn't get to bring it up. And I'd actually like to talk to Randall about this if I ever get to speak with him again. Aquinas, as a good lapsed Catholic myself, I'm kind of familiar with him.
Dude, me too.
Yeah, I think everyone is. It's kind of a death out, so I'm still on the books. But Aquinas actually had an interesting thought about this, where he was talking about the Ten Commandments and how they were absolute objective moral laws. But at the same time, he said that God could change what someone deserved based on circumstance. So even in that absolutist framework, they kind of realized the absurdity of it. And we brought up a lot of fiction too, but the classic one that a lot of people are probably familiar with is Jean Valjean. As a theater bro, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with that one.
Very familiar.
But he steals a loaf of bread to save a starving child. And if there's a absolute moral law of the universe, then like how could he steal this loaf of bread to feed this child, or how could there be a starving child in the first place if everyone's acting according to these universal moral laws? Because we know, I mean, everyone's done something immoral in their life. I know I have. But if you try to do something immoral, you're not stopped. Yeah.
Well, and I don't think so the thing about like morality and immorality, it has to really be an internal thing. It has to come from this person and the species in general. Like I remember I was kind of having a religious or philosophical conversation with like a new atheist style person. And I was one of those for like a couple of years. It was very cringy when I went through my Hitchens phase.
I got out of that right after the God delusion. I just after like Jesus Camp came out, that was like the end of my new atheist period. Yeah. So I got out right before it became super cringy.
Excellent for you. Yeah, I got out around 20. Well, let me see. It would have been after. Yeah, I can't remember 100% exactly when I was in there. 2014, 2012, maybe. I wrote a great play called Berserker while I was in that headspace, which I hope will be produced or turned into a comic very soon, and deals with like a sort of a retelling of the Christ story. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. Yeah. So like, I was in this conversation with a new atheist, and they were sitting there and they were like, how could a loving God create a world where there are, and I knew this was cribbed from Christopher Hitchens because I remember hearing him say it, where there are like worms that will infect a kid's eyes and eat their eyes out and blind them. And I'm just sitting there and I was just like, well, that's great for the worm, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was designed to freaking do that. I'm sure that worm thinks that's like the highest moral good.
At the same time, though, you kind of see the point that Hitchens, through that guy, was getting at, where like if there is an all-powerful creator and there is an objective moral standard that exists through it or through the universe, doesn't that all-powerful creator have a duty to intervene to avoid suffering? Mm-hmm. That's a classic problem. I mean, that's been a problem since the Greeks, the problem of evil. So it's like, if there are these objective moral truths, why aren't they revealed obviously to us? Why is it some sort of sick test? So, I mean, you can get.
I have an answer for that, by the way.
Oh, actually. Do you really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And you have to come from an Eastern framework to have this answer, because it doesn't make any sense within the Western framework.
Hey, fair enough.
Yeah, the Western idea of God is tied up in our political structures. So, exactly. For instance, Catholic Church is based off of a medieval court where the priest is the like the major domo, and the king is God.
Well, yeah, in the West, you could argue that God is a dream of good government.
As an anarchist, I agree.
Yeah, it's this unerring, all-caring, all-loving entity that is everywhere and always intervenes correctly.
And wants to help everybody and is never wrong. Yeah. And it's how people behave in churches, how you behave before a monarch. You bow
exactly.
Or kneel, because if you're bowing or kneeling before a monarch, he's not going to be able to stab you. You're not going to be able to stab him. You can't attack him. That's why our altar, the back is to the wall. That's why king sits in a throne with the back to the wall. Anyway, so it's tied up in our political ideology. But like, if you go back to Buddhism and Hinduism, the way they look at the world is not so much as a court, or in a human way, but more as a drama, as in everything that there is essentially the dreaming godhead, which is to say that like Brahma is the primary actor of the universe. The god, he's everything. It's not just like all, Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and men and women are merely players. This is all the world's a stage, and also the stage is Brahma, and the audience is Brahma, and the director is Brahma, and the script is Brahma. It's all the godhead splitting itself into a million billion different forms to experience itself.
Right.
And so like when you look at it that way and you take a more naturalistic way of looking at it, you realize sort of like the discords of the world and the discords of your life and the discords of people's lives, they're conflict at one level, but they're actually harmony at a much higher level. Alan Watts compared it to the struggle that goes on in your blood between like the antibodies and whatever pathogens happen to come in. And that we're actually this single we're actually the whole organism experiencing itself as a singularity. Because consciousness and I is that by definition that's a singular process. Like if you're I, something else must exist.
What's funny is how I became familiarized with that idea. One, my dad is a filthy hippie, and the other the other way is there was a Saturday morning cartoon show in the mid '90s called Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys, which is a terrible show.
But I've never heard of it.
It's terrible. It's awful, but it's hilarious. It's complete. It's like the apotheosis of the '90s. But they actually find the dreamer, like the Brahma figure, in that show in space, and they start like whispering their wishes into its ear, and like it comes true.
Because they're
and my dad is like sitting watching this with me because he's a filthy hippie and didn't have anything better to do on a Saturday morning, and he's like, "Oh, that's Brahma," and I'm like, "Who?" 3 or 4 hours later, and I'm pretty familiarized with that concept.
Just like, well, I kind of like the concept to play with both because I'm an actor, and like as a Buddhist, it's kind of, I guess the idea is that the universe throws out these ideas to make it seem like what we're faced with is something that is really, really serious and important. And I think that ultimately that's more or less a delusion, and what we're faced with is more on the end of playful. And that's actually why I embrace sort of Nietzsche's theory of aestheticism. Like I talk about it in one of my plays, the making your life into a work of art.
Well, the Apollonian and Dionysian are like made for plays. And from the Western perspective, you can read Camus, and as somebody who's read too much Camus, like I strive every day to embrace the fact that we're all absurd heroes going through this insane thing called life, and you have to kind of picture yourself as Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain.
And you imagine Sisyphus is happy. I saw a great webcomic on that actually. Where
is it? Existential Comics?
It might have been. It was the one where he's pushing the rock up the mountain, and it might have been SMBC, I think, because he's pushing the rock up the mountain, and he gets the rock up to the mountain, and it's like achievement 10,000 pushes.
I've seen that one. I've seen that. Yeah, it's great. And but that's another thing though. We were bringing up ancient Greek mythology, and the ancient Greeks were incredibly intelligent people. And we still
children. By the way, dude, bringing that up was
the child. Oh yeah, absolutely, man. The Spartans like brutally tortured children as like a high moral goal. The only thing that's actually left of ancient Sparta today, if you go there, and please go there, drink some ouzo for me. The only thing that's left of ancient Sparta is the rock where they tied the kids to when they would beat the crap out of them.
Our child murder rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Our child torture rock. That's what endures.
Yeah, well, the Romans turned it into like a tourist destination, like a proto Disneyland, because the Romans had like real sick ideas of entertainment because they didn't have the YouTubes. But like they turned it into like a Disneyland type thing where they would have like the locals act out like the agoge and like the trading of the children for their amusement.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's some sick stuff, but like they didn't view that as like a moral ill. They viewed that as like, oh, this is just
This
how we do things.
badass.
Yeah, awesome. They probably bought like the equivalent of like a logo tee, like a logo toga. Like I went to Sparta and all I got was this logo toga.
Well, it was what was the well, even Frank Miller, like you can tell he thinks that's badass. Like if you read the 300 or watch the movie.
Frank Miller has like some profound issues, man.
Yes, he does. He's massively paranoid. I remember he said some awful things about Occupy.
He wrote RoboCop 2. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so this has been great. We should definitely talk again. I would love to have you back on the channel, and I'd love to be on your podcast. Do you have anything you want to plug to my...
So right now we're a startup podcast right now. We started this during the lockdown. My co-host Rocco and I love having deep philosophical conversations. I kind of threw him into the deep end when I bought him like Heidegger, but having never read philosophy before because it's all fucking deep end, guys. But
has he gotten to in framing yet? By the way.
No, he's in Descartes now. He went like backwards.
Oh, okay. That's my favorite thing with Heidegger is his concept of inframing.
Well, Rocco is really into computer programming, so I bought him the Essay on Technology, which he just recently read. And I had to tell him like, don't read this in public. But you can follow Space Rocco 2 on Twitter. You can follow Mustache Bob on Twitter. MustacheMafia.space is the website that we're building. 5x5 Podcast is the Facebook page. And 5x5 Podcast on SoundCloud is where we're posting our audio right now. We're going to start up a YouTube channel. Hopefully I'll plug that next time we talk. And it was an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. And even the other two guys that we disagreed with, it was a very civil conversation. And I hope we advance the dialectic for like one or two people, except for that one dude who said I sounded like Dave Rubin.
We will hunt that guy down, and we will tie him to a rock, and we'll beat him like he's a Spartan child.
Exactly correct. Then he'll deserve it because it's an objective truth. All right, man. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Out.